Hello guys, welcome to this video. In this video, we will be studying about what is Nginx.conf file, how this Nginx.conf file is configured, like what are the different elements available in Nginx.conf. Let's head over to the AWS console and pick the public IP of Nginx server. So let's pick the public IP, open MobaXterm, create a new session, SSH, just paste the remote host, advanced SSH settings, use the key. Here we need to give the username, that's Ubuntu. So now we are in the console of Nginx. Since the Nginx is found in the /etc directory, so we'll head over to the Nginx directory where we will find this Nginx.conf file. Let's cd to /etc Nginx. If we see the contents, we can simply find this Nginx.conf file. Let's open this using nano editor. So we are in the Nginx.conf file. Let's pick each and every element of this conf file and we'll try to understand what they actually do. So in this first line, if we see, this is user Nginx. It is simply telling like the process that will be running inside Nginx will run as Nginx user. First, I'll tell you, like in Nginx, we have two processes. The first one is the master process and the other one is the worker process. So the master process launches some n number of worker processes by reading the Nginx.conf file. The worker process usually takes care of all the processes and responds to all queries of client. So here we can see the worker process is defined as 1. Well, the value that is defined here is actually the number of worker process that will be available to this Nginx server. We can define a custom value here, or we can simply write here auto. Auto will find itself like how many processes are required. Well, there is a general rule for this number of worker processes. It totally depends on the number of CPU cores available with your system. Since the worker process defined as 1, let's check how many cores our Nginx server has. So we have came out of this Nginx file, Nginx.conf file. Just to check like what are the number of cores available, just open this CPU info file. We'll do cat /proc and then CPU info. If we can check here, the number of CPU cores is 1. And if you can recall, the worker process number defined there was 1. So our general rule, like how many number of worker processes will be there, is totally dependent on the number of CPU cores. Let's head back to our Nginx.conf file. So these number of worker processes are usually determined by the number of cores. Next, the error log. Since Nginx has two kinds of log, one is access log and the other one is error log. So error log actually contains information related to Nginx errors. They can be error like when website is not accessible, when website is not working, or some issue with the Nginx service. We can also change the directory as per our need, or we can create simply say like I have created one folder in the home directory with the name log. So we can simply define the the directory path and followed by the log name. The log name should be error.log or whatever we need to define. The next section is PID. So this will define like what will be the PID for Nginx. Now coming to this event section, since in Nginx this HTTP, events and the other part is actually called context. So event is a context. The event context is used to set global options that affect how Nginx handles connections at general level. So it is telling 1024 here as the number of worker connections. So other variable things like the global variables that we define while writing a program is the same thing like that. So we'll define the global things here in this events context. Let's talk about this HTTP context. So this HTTP context holds the majority of the configuration. This context will contain all of the directives and other context necessary to define how the program will handle HTTP or HTTPS connections. Let's learn about this HTTP as well. If you can see here, we are finding a directive called include. It's also sort of a context or a directive, you can call it any. So since we can see, we are including one file that's /etc/nginx/mime.types. So mime.types is mime.types is simply a file structure that will simply define like what kind of file the web browser is getting, defined by like type and the type of file like PDF or something else, like what the browser should do when it is getting certain kind of content. Let's move to this directory /etc nginx mime.types cd slash. We are already in this directory. Let's open this mime.types file. If you can check, there are multiple types of these mime types. You can see text/html, text/css. So these are the different type of extensions that we have, and the different MIME types. So whenever the content that is supplied by the Nginx server contains such kind of information, it will simply send it to the browser, and the browser will return the response, or you can say the browser will show the response as supplied in this format. Like when there is a HTML content supplied, then browser will first read the type as text/html, and then it will show the content as HTML. So if you can just create a curl request with -i type, then with the URL, then simply you will get to know what type of file it is. Now let's head back to our Nginx.conf. If you can see, there are some default types. So there is one more file, that's octet stream. So when suppose there will be a case when mime.types does not include a file like .exe or some other kind of stuff, like there is some media file or something else, then how come the browser will know like what to do with such kind of files? So octet stream will tell like when there are files that are not part of mime.types and a part of octet stream like .exe, simply download the file. So the browser will in turn will do the same. Now heading to the next section, this is log format. So this is simply the log format of this access log. Like there'll be first remote address, then what's the user, the time, the request type, the status, the byte sent, the different reference and agents, and other stuffs. So this is configurable. You can change the log format type. Now coming to this access log, this is actually the log that gets printed whenever any request is coming to Nginx server from outside. Whenever we are hitting some IP or let's say some URL, we can say like google.com, then there must be some Nginx server or some other web server that request or the kind of query, let it be like a get request or a put request. So everything will be there in this access log. This access log can be found in this var log nginx access.log directory, or simply like you can define a customized directory here and can have the log there as well. Now there are some other directives or the different options as well, like include directive. You already know, like if you want to include any kind of file with this nginx.conf, then you can simply use this include and then define the directory path. So here we are including this conf.d directory, and including every file that is ending with .conf. So what are we doing here is we are not writing every configuration that is part of Nginx here in nginx.conf only. just because if we write everything here, then it will become too big, and suppose in the future when we want to debug something, it will be very difficult for us to debug. So just to avoid these messy things, we are writing separate conf file, and we always place these conf file in this conf.d directory inside this nginx directory. We will head over to this conf.d directory in the later part of our tutorial. Now let's talk about this gzip. So this is related to the http compression. We'll cover this in our http compression section. Then keep alive, timeout. This is actually the value of the persistent connection that we want. So this is all about Nginx.conf file. Let me tell you one more thing here. So suppose whenever you are doing any change to this Nginx.conf file, always remember to run Nginx-t just to check syntax, because syntax is very must in this Nginx.conf file. Suppose if you have done some changes in any part of this conf file, and suppose and you have just saved it and just reloaded the Nginx server, then there might be issues like Nginx will get stopped, and your whole website will get down. So in order to avoid such kind of situation, there is a syntax check available with Nginx. So just go and do Nginx-t. So this is all about Nginx.conf. We'll head over to the next sections and learn about the different concepts of Nginx there.